Hello everyone, welcome back to another Craft of the Draft video, the AFL Draft and the AFL Rookie Draft. Finally over. It's like, the Christmas day of the AFL Draft world when that day comes around, and it's been a big few months, whole year leading up to it really, and thank you if you joined Dylan Alexander's live stream the other night and caught us talking for 4.5 hours, I think it was, which that doesn't seem like a long number to us because that just seems like our normal, the length we talk. But this video, we're just going to break down every club, and you would have seen a bunch of these type of videos and articles released now that the draft is done. We're going to give our take on every club's performance at the draft. And look, we haven't even discussed, I guess, the categories. The way I think we'll look at it, though, is, I guess, the picks they had, so what type of talent they brought in, the value of that talent necessarily. So have they got a really strong player that can suit AFL straight away? Did they make use of a lower pick with a higher talent and things like that? I guess the list profile needs, did they meet them? And I guess looking into the future, did they get players that can help, I guess, clubs who are on their way out maybe of the top 8 and just to keep the list development ticking over? So let's start from the top. We'll start with Adelaide. So they walked away with 2 players we were pretty confident they'd walk away with, in Sid Draper at 4, Tyler Welsh at 59. We're also going to grade each club after we go through them. So I'll throw to you first. I mean, no real surprises here. It was really either going to be Jagger or Sid at that first one, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they'd been linked to Harvey Langford as well. I think Sid Draper's probably the best pickup they could have got when it's a line ball decision like it sounded like it ended up being. Then you're going to go for the local talent. I suppose that plays a part in it, and he's obviously someone who's going to be able to add something a little bit different to the midfield. They're going to have Saligo, they're going to have Rankin that will run through there, that will liven them up a little bit, and they've obviously got the players that have run through there in the past couple of seasons. But I think Sid Draper, and you've watched him a lot more than I have, but he's someone who will add a different element to that midfield mix.
I think he would have added wherever he went. The thing I like with Draper when I watched is he's not necessarily a player that can go into the half forward and be a smaller forward, but he knows how to create offensive impact in the midfield, so he can go forward and push inside 50 and score goals if he needs to through open play. So it's just a different element of his game that I like. I guess Tyler Welsh, if you were to kind of sum up, because they ended up trading up a bit, which we were a bit confused at the time because it was a rigid... they had a lower pick, but they went up, so I don't know if they were worried at all. But it's a tricky decision, and I'll talk about it more with Carlton and the Camporelli twins and why I wasn't, as happy with it. But with Welsh, is it still a good pickup regardless of what was on the table still?
I think so, yeah. I can understand why they would want someone alongside Darcy Fogarty and Riley Thorpe that's probably a little bit smaller but more powerful in that next generation. In the forward line, his body of work maybe was a little bit inconsistent. The only other thing I'd add about Adelaide is could they have been a little bit more proactive to get Alex Dodson, the local ruck? I think that's something you talked about in the live stream, actually. They needed a successor for Riley O'Brien, it feels like, and Dodson was one that slipped a fair bit, so they wouldn't have to have given up as much capital as they might initially have thought. So as they did see him slip, was that coming into consideration at all?
Well, I guess the value of trading futures maybe for him didn't appeal to them as much. So
and I think they'd already traded away one of their future picks as well, so the hand that they had was already compromised. They would have had to have taken that into account.
So grade at A to F. A tricky one. I'd probably just give him a solid B.
I'd go a C. Exactly what I expected, and nothing more and nothing less.
I think for the talent they have, though, it will... compared to previous drafts where you have questions over the talent, I think these two can't really go wrong in their system, and especially Welsh. She's been around their system for a while. So I'll give him a B. Brisbane, one that really couldn't have got it wrong, literally could not have got that wrong. Ashcroft slipped at 5. I think we made it clear we're not really that happy that he slipped all the way to 5. That doesn't feel that justified. Sam Marshall at 25, fair enough. And then Ty Gallop at 42, so they matched that bid. Was it Geelong who made that original bid? And then they picked up Sam Day as well through the rookie draft. So Yeah, and I said this. They've literally taken two players a bottom four side should have ended up with in the draft, which is just totally unfair. And that's the whole, that's the whole side of it.
It's a different conversation, isn't it? Whether with the academy and the father son, but I guess from a Brisbane point of view, the other thing I'd add is getting Levi Ashcroft and Sam Marshall below where they would have gone in an open draft means they don't go into points deficit, which is really positive when you consider that they've got Dan Annable, who is going to be a midfielder to watch next year. So I think they walk away from this draft really happy. There was talk for a long time that they wanted a key forward to come in. They were linked to Floyd Burmeister, and they ended up staying local and getting Ty Gallop and, like you said, the mature ager in Sam Day as well. So for me, it's an A+. They couldn't have gone wrong, and they're set up well to match a bid for Annable next year should they choose to.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. I thought they traded really well on the night in the end to just flicker through a few picks into next year and I guess have a bit of a safety net there. Yeah, it's an A+ purely because they could not have got that wrong, and they've got two talent that really shouldn't be at their club for how good they are at this point in time. Carlton, Jagger Smith at 3, Harry O'Farrell at 40, Campo Ben at 43, Campo Lucas at 54, and Harry Charlson in the rookie draft. I mean, I said I'll comment on the Campos, but we'll start with Jagger at 3. Did you think that was the right decision? I had Carlton leaning towards a Sid Draper type. And I think Jagger's amazing. He'll suit the list needs as well as Sid will. But I just think Sid has that extra bit of offensive flair that Jagger only shows from time to time. And unless he's placed inside 50 tactically, I don't think he ever really shows that in his game. He just stays back a little bit. So your thoughts on Jagger at 3?
I think they're going to have to play a particular style of footy through the midfield to enable them to use Jagger Smith and Sam Walsh in a way where they complement each other rather than getting in each other's way because they're similar types of midfielders. I know it's something Dylan Alexander spoke about on our live stream, and I think it's a really valid point. That was the way I looked at it. So I would have expected them to go in a different direction, but he's got leadership written all over him, and you expect his one that if you had to put a bet on out of that top 5, top 10 echelon of midfielders, he's the one you'd say is going to be that 250 gamer, you probably say. Harry O'Farrell was the next one a little bit later. He slid perhaps a little bit, I think pick 38 he went to, and a good pickup for them. They needed someone to help Jacob Wiedering in the medium term. Will take a little bit of time to develop after an injury-interrupted year, but I think that answered a list need clearly.
Oh, 100% it did, and he's proved that he's going to be able to stack it up at the professional level. I guess the lack of footy was the question mark, and it'd be interesting if he did get a year of footy under him, a consistent year that is. He probably would have touched the top 25, most likely.
Possibly, and I had someone say the same thing to me yesterday. I actually disagree with that, just based on the fact that we saw a lot of tools fall, and I feel like he would never have actually overtaken Jack Whitlock, Matt Whitlock,
maybe in a power ranking sense, but on the actual night, you make a good point there. And I'll move to the Camporelli discussion, and look, they're good players, right? It's not like you're taking players that you're like, oh, do we really have to take him? But I guess what I was a bit annoyed at is you had a player like Jasper Alger on the table come pick 40 that the Blues had, or pick 43, whatever it was that they ended up using. And when you've just let Matt Elwes out the door, you've got literally the perfect replacement still on the table. Arguably has better skills further up the ground as well, you could argue. You miss out on them for a player like Ben Camporelli, who I just don't think suits a list need whatsoever at the moment. I don't think he would break into that midfield anywhere in the next 2 years, just based off, they've literally traded up for their prototype midfielder. So what is the use of Ben Camporelli unless they're going to switch him around? Lucas Camporelli, I do see a bit more scope with as a wingman halfback. So that was, I guess, a disappointment that you had such a talent on the board still, but you guess you have to go with the father-son, and I get it's the romanticism of it all. But that was my...
Can I just briefly ask you as well? They took Harry Charlson in the rookie draft, and a great kid. I'm happy to see him get taken. And I was speaking to Ollie Hannaford actually at the media opportunity on Thursday morning at AFL House, and it sounded like everyone sort of thought he was a 50-50 around GWV, so it's good to see him get taken. Is Carlton the right fit when they already had Camporelli, like you said, who is a halfback that they'd brought in?
Well, that was the question I couldn't figure out either. And you had Billy Wilson that came in last year as well. So I think it depends on what they're going to do with Billy Wilson on that list as well.
Yep.
Adam Sard, and I'm quoting a good friend, Pommy in Oz here, who I talked about this to yesterday, who he thinks that Billy Wilson will turn into that tag role. So So you're basically waiting for Adam Sard. He'll get slower. You've got Billy Wilson coming in. Harry Charlson's that backup, so you kind of never lose anything in that role. So I can understand it from that point of view. It's just, I think, short term, it doesn't really make any sense at all. But if you had to grade him, I'd give him it's really tough.
I'd give him a B. Yeah, personally.
I was going to say B minus, because the first two are good. I just think the two Campos and Harry Charlson don't add anything immediately, so that's where I struggle to balance. But I'll give him B minus. Collingwood, further down the order, Joel Cochran, they look surprised when Sydney didn't match the bid. So the Swans Academy product gets to the Pies. Charlie West at 50 and Will Hayes at 56. I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, I think Joel Cochran, although there might have been an element of surprise from a Collingwood point of view that they got Joel Cochran, they were definitely looking for a halfback because they were linked really heavily to both Asher Eastham and Riek Andrews, so that they clearly did want that defender, and getting Joel Cochran could be positive in the medium term, but I was hoping that we would take a key forward with that first pick. Ultimately, we got Charlie West, and that was okay. That was the forward that we were after, and the clubs in between Collingwood's two picks didn't take a key forward. And then Will Hayes, who's a good ground level player as well in the front half. I think they answered the list needs that they needed to, but I would have gone in a different direction in terms of player.
Well, it's hard to assess. The way I'm thinking is, when you've got 47, 50 and 56, you're not going to have the best at the table. Yep. And I think that's the real struggle to assess that type of talent, because we were saying, let's assess the value of the talent. Well, it's not great, is it? It's not like they're not A-grade stars at all, and I think they're going to be built into role player types, which I think will pay off for the long term. You've got stars coming in next year, like a Tom McGuan. So I think they're just players they'd like to build around for the next generation. So in terms of a grade, what would you give? I'd say
minus,
C.
C minus, yeah. C minus, yeah, just because I think there was better players available on the board in terms of key forwards and in terms
Is there one you would have gone with?
They were never linked to him, but Floyd Burmeister I thought would have suited Collingwood very well. But we'll move on to Essendon.
So Kako at 13, that bid fair?
Yeah, fair. Yep.
Cal Garine at 37, Angus Clark 39, Reece Unwin at 61, Zach Johnson at 70, Archer Day Wicks in the rookie draft, and Jaden Ewan as a Category B rookie. A lot to unpack here, and I think they're actually one of the more interesting clubs because it felt like the longer the night went, the more they capitalised on it and took selections that we weren't not as much expecting, but I think we were just confused to the direction they were heading in after a while. I think it started really well and then just started to end up banking the best available rather than list needs.
Sometimes clubs do go best available talent, so sometimes that can be a viable strategy. Isaac Kako, so he brings a lot of X factor and pizzazz in the front half, but I think getting Reece Unwin really complements him well because Isaac Kako is that deeper forward who you think Nick Watson, you think what he's able to do and what he's produced in his first year at AFL level, but then Reece Unwin's going to connect with him really well in terms of his ball use going inside 50. He's really clean. He can pinch it in the midfield in the long term as well. The pick I really liked was Angus Clark. I think there was an expectation he would go a little bit higher than what he did, and they were linked to a lot of running half backs as well. They were another one that was linked to Asher Eastham, and they ultimately ended up getting probably their preferred player in that position. So that gives them a bit of dash and something a bit different. And Zach Johnson off halfback to start as well. That seemed like it was expected a long way out. And he joins his best mate at the Dons in Nate Cuddy.
Well, I'll ask you about Cal Garine, probably the one we haven't touched on, but do you rate that as a choice? I was a bit surprised when it did come through. I think it's good to have that kind of backup to a Draper, a pinch hitting ruckman that has a lot of forward flair. Does he suit their type of game is the question I ask. where do you actually see him fitting in at the next level? Does he stay as a permanent forward that can just pinch in the ruck, or does he?
I think he has to, because I was speaking to someone who about Cooper Keogh.
Yep.
Essendon was linked to Cooper Keogh, a mature-aged ruck out of Coburg, and the expectation was that Essendon, who was linked to him, wouldn't take him because they already had enough rucks on their list with Bryan and Draper there, as well as Goldstein coming into his last year. So I think you'd have to expect he would be that powerful forward, and he is probably undersized, if anything, to be a ruck at AFL level. So I expect he'd be a forward.
He's got the frame to be ready-made to go to senior level at least,
Yeah.
and I'll give him that. So if the opportunity does arise next year, I don't think physically he'll have to worry too much. Just give a quick comment on Archie Wicks and Jaden Newen. I guess those two making it onto the list quite late. Archie Wicks was probably the one that would have been quite nervous after the national draft.
Yeah, and I think it felt like he was going to be that hard luck story. You have one every year from the AFL Academy, the top echelon. Yeah, I'm glad he got onto a list. I think he's got too much potential and X factor and upside to not get onto a list, but does he suit Essendon's needs? I'm not sure. He was linked with Essendon a little bit, so perhaps it was just a case of we'll only take a player here if there's one that we really like and has fallen through the cracks, and he was that player. Jaden Newen, an up-and-down season, sort of low risk. They wanted some dash-off half-backs, so it gives them a bit of choice if Angus Clark doesn't turn out or they want to play him in a different position.
Part of the NGA, I think, helps as well. So a bit of experience in the system. Grade?
B.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I was going to say B+. Those last two picks I had them really high, but I've moved a little away given the fact that I think they just moved away from list needs come the end of it. Freo, Murphy Reid at 17, Charlie Nichols 34, Jaron Carr at 63, and Aidan Riddle in the rookie draft.
Yep.
Probably one of the teams that have had a few question marks with their first pick specifically, and this is where the value of their draft has, will get graded a little lower. What are your initial thoughts on Murphy Reid? Because I think they could have really hit a list need a little bit better if a Joe Berry gets there.
You know how excited I was about Freo's draft hand entering the night, and I think they came away, and you talked about Essendon not necessarily addressing needs. I think that's true of Freo.
Yeah.
Because
I
think Freo, you've got Hayden Young in that midfield, you've got Caleb Sarong in that midfield, and you've got Andrew Brayshaw. And I know you need midfield depth, but I feel like Murphy Reid's the sort of player that in the medium term, he's someone you want starting in your midfield, and you've already got your three starting midfielders. Yeah. And then they needed smaller type forwards, and then all of those forwards and players that they brought in got some height. And you think, well, hang on, Jai Amos and Josh Tracy, they're going to be the ones that, if they're going to push for a premiership in the next decade, are going to be your anchor points. So they're a team that, while I'm not necessarily against the talent they've brought in, I don't think it answers their list needs.
The only thing I'll give them is I did think there was the need for an extra key defender, and I know Charlie Nichols hasn't predominantly played there, but he has at times played down back, so I can get on board with that somewhat, but I think that's a very high risk, very reward type pick with him. Jaron Carr, personally have not seen enough of, so I can't comment.
Yeah, but size up forward is what, and for their first ever national father-son selection, so that's a nice little storyline as well.
And then Aidan Riddle produced some good efforts as well as a backman. So, look, I think the talent, the talent itself is not terrible by any means. It's the list needs that really rank them down. I'd give it, that's a C- for me.
Yeah, that's a D for me.
That's a D. So with that. Oh, no, I won't say will that be your lowest because I don't want you to spoil anything. We'll move to Geelong.
Yeah.
And, of course, they pick, every player under the sun that you've never heard of before. But, no, not never heard of. Jake Polkinghorne at 44, Jacob Mollier at 52, and then Eleni Hoffman, Saints didn't match the bid at 66. Keaton Matafai-Forbes at 69, Xavier Ivicic, Pat Reshko, and Joe Pike in the rookie draft.
Just before we do get to analysing these players, there was a lot of bids that weren't matched on the night, and I thought that was an interesting storyline. We had Lenny Hoffman, you had Joel Cochran, as we've already talked about, and they were certainly not the only ones. Cooper Bell, another one from GWS's academy. So I guess the way I'd sort of analyse that is there's more and more talent coming out of those next generation academies and those northern academies as well. Clubs might like to only take one, and they need to address list needs as well. So as much as it's romantic to take as many as possible, it's also not necessarily what the list needs, and I think we saw that with St Kilda. But let's carry on with the Geelong analysis.
It feels like they went, if you read me those names out, I would have said Xavier Ivicic, Pat Reshko, and then Keaton, and then I would have said the rest, or Lenny, and then the rest are in a rookie. So like they've almost gone the
wrong
opposite,
way around.
the opposite way. But yeah, hard. And again, the first two I haven't seen as much of. I don't want to give a proper opinion, not seeing as much as their football. Lenny Hoffman at 66, I think, is a great pickup. Keaton Matafai Forbes, we talked about the need for that Gary Rowan replacement.
Yeah.
Whilst I don't think Keaton's footing really stacked up getting drafted this year at least, I do think over time he will become that replacement, and he definitely has a lot of upside still left to tap into. And then Ivicic and Reshko in a rookie is decent value, I think, given Geelong's track record with making players good out of nowhere.
Yeah, the thing I'd say about Geelong is the sounds coming out of that camp going into the draft was that they really like Dodson. They're going to trade up for Dodson. In the end, they got two different rucks. I'm not sure why the ruck area was such a list desire for them. I didn't think that was an area they needed to target as much as they clearly have, but they've got Joe Pike, the local ruck, and Jacob Mollier, so I'll be interested to see if they both are developed as ruckman, because they do seem ruckman, but maybe one of them becomes a key forward. I think Xavier Ivicic complements the midfield really well. You look at someone like a George Stevens, who was drafted last year, and some others that I think aren't necessarily that dynamic type of player. So I think he's someone who's a bit more light-footed and will add to that mix as well. And Keaton Matafai Forbes, I really liked what they did with Shannon Neal this year, Geelong, and thought that was a bit more unpredictable. And Keaton Matafai Forbes a little bit similar in terms of being that undersized medium forward.
Grade?
B minus.
Oh God, I don't even want to give a grade for Geelong, because it's one of those look back in a couple of years. I'll give him I'd say a B minus, because I think it's a lot of just wait and see what these guys do at the next level. The Suns, Lombard at 9. Actually, Lombard at 9. Yes, no.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
Cooper Bell 49. Max Noble, Asher Eastham in the rookie draft, and Lachlan Goulburn as a Category B rookie. So couldn't have gone really wrong with Leo Lombard. Cooper Bell the bid was not matched. So it's interesting whether these clubs genuinely want these players, and if they're just taking a risk for the sake of it. Surely they'd have to have some interest.
I assume that GWS, though, would have known that they weren't going to match that bid. Gold Coast would have known GWS wouldn't have matched the bid, given that there was talk that Logan Smith was almost certainly going to be matched, and they loved Josiah Delana all year. That was publicised quite heavily. So I think from a Gold Coast perspective, it's a positive draft because of Leo Lombard. A great story to see Asher Eastham get picked up. He was at his school graduation. So, it was agony turned to ecstasy, I suppose, and he was the celebrity on that day. And, good story as a halfback. But, they shore up their defensive stocks and bring in a quality midfielder. Yeah,
I like the Asher Eastham pickup. I think that's just a nice development player you can have in the background. And whilst all their academies tick away as their mainstay in that side, you can have some reliability down the line. So what was your grade for the Suns?
A minus.
Yeah, look, I'd be close to giving them an A, because I think the value of Lombard, again, should be going to a bottom 4 side. And Gold Coast are pretty close to that, actually. So it's not, based off recent form and the ladder, so it's not too bad in terms of where he went. The Giants.
And I just want to say they did get some points in for the 2025 to match Ezekiel and
they'll need it.
Dylan Patterson and Bo Adams also. That's a positive thing, but going with the Giants.
The Giants. Ollie Hannaford, 18. Harry Oliver at 19. Chucking the surprises early. Cody Angove at 24. Jack Howe at 36. Logan Smith at 71.
Yeah.
And Josiah Delana as a Category B rookie.
Yeah.
How many times have we talked about Ollie Hannaford? Where's he go? I still think 8. Look, for the form he's in, 18, did the right thing, snap him up while he's still available. I don't think in 5 years' time he would be the 18th best player in this draft class. But he does fit the Giants type very, very well, so you can tick that off. And Harry Oliver as well, I think, fits a list need really well. I think they got both those picks really right.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Adrian Caruso was quoted yesterday saying, GWS, we came in wanting those 3 players to the first night, and we came away getting those 3 players. So that's perfect for them. And like you said, I think it just suits their style as well. Harry Oliver gives them that bounce off halfback. Jack Howe on that second night gives them the flexibility as well. I think what was also said in that quote that I read is that they got Cody Angove to complement those two first players that they got. They saw Hannaford and Oliver as the clear 2 picks, and then Angove on the wing really complements them.
Yeah, well, Angove's an interesting one and performed well at the national championships and showcased his running capacity is quite good for his size, and he's still got a lot to build on his body type. Logan Smith at 71 got him pretty low in the end and didn't have to do too much. And Josiah Delana, has some creativity, probably needs to get his hands on the footy a lot more when he's playing and be able to showcase that, but we've seen with ball in hand he's quite good. It's pushing an A+. I think it's just under an A+, but it's certainly one of the better.
Yeah, I'd go.
They always walk away well.
Yeah, A-. Hawthorn took Noah Mraz and Cody Anderson.
Yeah, they're such a hard one to analyse because they don't feel like they need anyone to come in right now, and obviously they did most of their work in the trade period with Battle. Who's the other one I can't put my finger on? Is Battle and Barras coming in. So they've met their list needs in that direction. Noah Mraz just adds a good bit of depth, and so does Cody Anderson. So I think you can't really complain from that perspective. But then all of a sudden, if the Hawks turn bad next year, are those the players you really need? So I think they're one you'll see in the next 6 months whether they nailed this draft rather than the next 2 years.
I think that Hawthorn have gotten really underrated hand. I actually really like what Hawthorn's done. So they got rid of Denver, Granger, Barras. They delisted him, so they probably needed a little bit of key defensive depth. Sam Frost and Tom Barras are both sort of older. Noah Mraz is going to complement Will McCabe really well down back in the next generation, I think. And then Cody Anderson will complement what Jack Ginnivan and Nick Watson do. He'll add that pressure, which will allow those two small forwards to really get to work. And then he might move into the midfield in the long term. But I'd give them an A.
Oh, yeah, I'd have to say I couldn't give him any less than an A. I just think it's an A with an asterisk of, I guess, time will tell because they're good at the moment. I think recency bias plays into the way we're assessing their draft. Melbourne, Harvey Langford at 6, Xavier Lindsay at 11, Aidan Johnson at 68, the surprise, and Ricky Menther as a Cat B. The question we both talked about was there really the necessity to get 2 midfielders here when you had Alex Taru on the board still at pick 6? What's your assessment? We know what we're thinking here, but I'll let you start on your thoughts of it. Yeah,
so they were linked to Alex Taru and Harry Armstrong, so if they wanted to tall up either end, they did their homework on both of those, overlooked them. I think it feels to me like as if they've future-proofed their midfield I don't want to say in case Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver leave, given there is a bit of discontent there, but it's very hard for me to escape that narrative. It does add a lot of balance having Harvey Langford and Xavier Lindsay because they're different types of midfielders. So I think if you go best available talent, I can absolutely understand why they've gone for those 2 players, but I would have brought in a key position player that's going to serve them more in the long term. I know they did get that in Aidan Johnson, but he's more of a plug and play in the immediate term, it feels like, if they want that sort of player.
I'd have to mirror those thoughts quite well. I do think they should have taken the risk on Alex Taru, to be honest. I think those Harvey Langford types will come around, especially next year. You'll probably see similar I think that's...
There's always top-end midfielders, aren't there?
Yeah, so whereas an Alex Taru, you can say the same for every type of position. So that's maybe it's not the strongest argument, but I think Harvey's in particular, those big bodies, they're becoming a lot more prominent these days. So I agree with you there. Ricky Menther, just nice to have there and give him that year, see what he comes up with. Yeah,
if it doesn't work out. I'd give Melbourne a C.
B minus.
It's good talent.
It's good talent.
Yeah.
So it's not, they haven't completely disregarded list needs, but it's weird because they've got great talent. It's just whether they could have done that. So B minus.
B minus as well.
North, massive talking point here. Foz at 2, Matt Whitlock at 27 with the asterisk there of the trade. Luke Urquhart at 57 and River Stevens at 67. Actually, give me a grade before we go into this, and then you can break it down from there.
C minus.
Yeah, I'd have to. No,
that's nothing against Matt Whitlock or Finn O'Sullivan either, but in terms of a couple of things, but your grade?
Yeah, it'd be a C.
Yeah.
Can we start backwards with River Stevens and Luke Urquhart?
Yep.
I was never big on River Stevens going. I don't think his year showed really any next step at the AFL. He was never one of the best small forwards by a stretch. He didn't even make the Vic Country squad, which...
Yes, he did.
Did he?
Yep.
How many games did he play?
2.
He played 2.
Yeah.
Well, at least I don't recall him having any strong performances at that level. So I don't think he ever stacked up against the best at under 18 level. So I understand Brother Son. I understand it. But
the only thing I'll say about River Stevens is it's going to take him 3 or 4 years to develop, and I think that on North Melbourne's list, that's not a bad thing because it's still going to be a while before they're competitive. So that's the only thing I'll say.
And that's the thing. They're not a club that can really keep taking risks on players who are going to take a long time. At least you can make the argument with an Adelaide and a Carlton that these father-sons, they're going into pretty well-established teams now that can contend or at least contend for finals at this point in time, whereas I'm not sure it's going to take a while. Luke Urquhart as well, adding another midfielder.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about... I want to bring Finn O'Sullivan into this conversation. I would have taken Alex Tarua at 2, and it's very hard for me to escape the belief that it's almost an optics selection getting Finn O'Sullivan, that you couldn't overlook such a high quality midfielder, whether it was Finn O'Sullivan, that was clearly the one they were linked to, or Jagger Smith or anyone else, Sid Draper, because of how high end they were. They had to have just gone for Taru and held their nerve despite not being able to trade, because he was the one that they really wanted. Instead, they had to get Matt Whitlock, and it might have cost them pick 1 next year. And not only pick 1 next year, but you know what the future implications of that are? Pick 1 goes to Richmond, who's going to be in the premiership window when North Melbourne is hopefully next in the premiership window. If you look at the rebuilding clock, you'd think it's Richmond.
Yeah, it is. It's. I don't actually have that many complaints about the pick swap, to be honest. Like, I think a player like Matt Whitlock will be definitely worth it down the line.
Yeah, so let me clarify. I can completely understand trading away
but I understand that as well.
A top pick for Matt Whitlock, and backing yourself that top pick will not be a top 5 pick because you think you're going to win more games next year. That midfield's developing. What I can't understand is when you had such a man crush, if I can say that, on Alex Taru and then overlooked him because you wanted to get another midfielder in when you've already got a surplus of midfielders. I don't get that.
And I think what makes it interesting is that you've literally given up all that for Matt Whitlock. You could have got a tall with a pick you never had to get rid of. So that's probably where the question marks are of why just not take that risk and why not do it. If they've taken a big enough risk at doing that, then why not just do it at pick 2? I think they're both as ballsy as each other either way. So...
And I just want to get something up that North Melbourne, they've had that many top-end picks in the last few years. So they've had 14 top 30 picks in the last 5 years. If you look at it like that, you say you can afford for that pick 2 not to necessarily be the best available, because at some point you're going to need to answer list needs. When you have that many top 30 picks, naturally a lot of them are going to be midfielders. Yeah,
I can agree with that. So you said C-. I said, I think C as well, C-. Yeah, it was one of the poorer draft selections in general for the Kangaroos.
Despite the talent, yeah.
Port Adelaide, Joe Berry at 15, Jack Whitlock 33, Christian Murray 38, and then Tom Cochrane in the rookie, and then Benny Barrett as a Cat B.
Yep.
Okay, if you top the 3 nationals, A+, the other 2 development, so it's to make it fair, it's an A overall, because Benny Barrett in particular has a lot of flair, X factor, but his disposal is not up to the standard at all, so very developmental. Tom Cochrane, think you know what you're getting, is a bigger body in the midfield, so again, can develop well. So to balance it, it's an A, but can we touch on the national? That was an outstanding end for Port Adelaide. I think considering what they did last year and how much it confused us, this was complete polar opposite.
No, not for me. The more I thought about it,
Go on.
I look at it and I say they were linked to Joe Berry for a long time. Joe Berry, as has been highly publicised, models his game on Robbie Gray, so he loved meeting Robbie Gray in the interviews. They've taken Joe Berry and Benny Barrett the year after taking Tom Anastasopoulos and Lockie Charlson, so they've got 4 small forwards in 2 years.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, that's a fair point. Well, but now, okay, you're taking into account last year's a lot more than I thought. I don't see Tom Anastasopoulos playing the same role as Joe Berry at the next level. I think
he's a high-running, speedy forward. Do you disagree?
You could play him on the outside, though, as well. And then
as a winger?
Yeah, and then you could say, well, they just got Christian Murray as well. But I could say, well, you could play him on the inside. I still think But those two came really low. They seem like, let's see how this goes at the next level. I mean, I'm surprised Lachie Charlton got picked up last
Possibly,
year,
but I think the fact that they did pick them means you have to back them and you can't be taking two more small forwards. So that's why the more I've thought about it, and Benny Barrett, arguably, you say it's a low risk if nothing comes of it. He's just on the Category B rookie list anyway, but I think they could have answered a different list need with that high-end pick. The one and only pick that I thought was really good that they took was Jack Whitlock, because I don't think any of Mitch Georgiades, Todd Marshall or Ollie Lord are going to be that guy up forward that you're going to build your forward line around. They're all second or third tall, so hopefully Jack Whitlock can be the anchor. I thought he was a real bargain, so that's a positive from a Port Adelaide perspective. And yeah, I don't think Christian Moreira's necessarily suited what they needed either.
Oh, I think he does. I think he provides a bit more run and accountability, at least, on the outside.
The only thing I'll say, he's got a lot of tools, so getting him at a low price is positive. Well, but yeah, I'd give them a C.
Just before I give my grade on the Jack Whitlock comment and about him being... I agree that none of those key forwards are really putting their name forward to be the mainstay, but Jack can be that, but not next year. And the problem... So great pickup, but... Port in their premiership window right now, and they're arguably exiting it. They've failed time and time again, right? Yep. So by the time, let's say it takes them 2 or 3 years, are they even in the window anymore?
Yeah, and it's probably a little bit more than 2 or 3 years.
So that's the only question mark.
The only thing I'll say though is those three names I mentioned, they're all going to be on the list for the next 8 or 9 years. So there's going to be a 4 or 5 year block where they're all playing together, and it could work out quite well.
Yeah, no, I mean, not to say that when you exit your window, you need to wait another 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if that was the case with Geelong, then, so it's not, I'm not saying, but look, it's looking that direction at least for Port. I'd give him as I said, an A. Richmond, the big one to talk about. Massive haul here. Lawler 1, Smiley 7, Hodden 12, 4, 14, Trainer 21, Armstrong 23, Sims at 28, and Auger at 58. Same deal with North. Let's start backwards here because I think that's the best way to look at it. Alga at 58, he just kept dropping and we just kept complaining the whole night. Where's Alga? Where's Jasper Alga? But they did well there to trade back in to get a pretty decent
I think I touched on it at the night, but everyone I spoke to felt like it was a 40s to 50s pick, and then Richmond, Sydney, GWS were interested in him in the first round. They all looked elsewhere. But really smart of Richmond and nifty to trade back into the back end to get a player they were interested in that kept falling, because I think he'll be someone that will add a bit of liveliness up forward. So I think that's positive.
And then you move to these 7 top 30 picks.
Yep.
Tom Sims was the one who instantly surprised us on the second night. So it started the second night when they just got Harry Armstrong and Jonty Full as well.
Yep.
And we talked on the live stream about the use of a ruckman these days. Yep. Do you need a 200 plus ruckman who's there for tap, or can you just rely on pinch hitting ruckmen who are mobile enough to move inside forward 50 and be an asset all around the ground? Do you subscribe to Tom Sims at the Richmond Tigers, or are you a little against it?
I think the only way I can understand this selection is if they see him as a ruck more than they do a forward, because they needed a successor to Toby Nankervis coming into the draft. There was a lot of talk they would get Alex Dodson. They've instead gone for Tom Sims. So it's a tough one, because you look at it and you go, I only subscribe to Tom Sims if they see him as more of a ruck, but then I'd go, but if they see him as more of a ruck, then why didn't you get Alex Dodson? So I don't see the need for 3 forwards, and I would have taken Dodson over Sims. So that's a real curious one for me. The personnel of the tall forwards, clearly I would have gone in a different direction. I've talked about Jobe Shanahan a lot, but they needed the keys and they addressed that. So that's a positive. The one thing I think they didn't get was a running defender. I think they needed a bit of flair off half back.
Yeah, and I think I talk about Harry Oliver. I think he would have been that.
He was linked to them as well.
He would have been a good fit. Can I bring up the talking point of Hodden and Trainer? That both great players, but I don't understand why you take 2 players who are prone to injury that we've seen. So, Hodden's got the ACL, and yes, not all injuries continue throughout a career. Should make that very clear. But obviously it's a massive risk you have to take, and you could even make the claim for Lawler, like I kept saying in my power rankings as well. So they have picked up 3 injury-prone players. So it's a big risk in itself. Do you agree? I mean, they're terrific talents, but all of a sudden, one of those goes down to injury. You've lost a massive talent in that haul. So do you think they should have gone safer, or have they just taken the risk they're great talents on their own.
The one that I'm probably most concerned about is Taj Houghton, because he's so athletic and elastic, sort of that athleticism. You don't want to lose it because of an ACL injury. You'd hope that he hasn't lost that, and we won't know that till he returns in May or June next year. But it sounds like their recovery is going well, chatting to him the day after the draft, which is positive. But I can absolutely understand that from a Houghton perspective. Having said that, he ended up going about where we think he would have gone, even if he'd played the full season. So that's positive from a personal point of view for Houghton.
And then right at the top with Smiley and Lawler, they've got a pretty big-bodied midfield now. It's actually it's similar to what Carlton kind of have the issue with at the moment, where there's not a lot of pace going through it. You add Hopper and Taranto to that mix as well. Like, it's not the quickest of midfields. And obviously these two, position-wise, could do anything in their first couple of years, but we're assuming, in the long term. Did they both get it right? I think Smiley is the absolute steal in that top 10 compared to anyone else that went. Lawler was expected, but Smiley...
Going to talk about West Coast soon, and I think they got the steals of the draft. But I think Richmond getting Algar and, like you say, Smiley, a couple of really big steals there. Yeah, I really am a fan of it. I think they're the two most transformative midfielders in the draft class. We did a video immediately after round one of the draft, so if you want to see a recap just on that, then head to our YouTube channel. But I was a fan of both selections. I thought they were the two best available, and they ended up bringing them both through their doors.
Last four clubs to go through.
I'd give it an A.
A grade.
Yep.
And grade. Yeah, I mean, it's an A based off talent alone. They're such a hard one because they're going to probably be down the bottom for a few more years, so you won't really see the full potential for another 4 or 5. The Saints, Toby Travalia at 8, Alex Turu at 10, Barrett at 32, Hugh Boxall at 45, Alex Dodson at 53, and then the surprise of Pat said all the way at 60. Yeah, it's one of Saints' better draft hauls, and I think they've got it right the last 3 years. So even, is it 3 years or pushing? Whichever one the Windhager one started at, was that 21?
21,
I think they've got it right pretty well. All those players are coming into their side year after year and making an instant impact. Start at the top with Travalia and Turu. Took, Travalia, I think obviously they see him as a mid, fast mid, and Turu, well, they've taken him where others didn't want to, and he'll add to a dynamic backline that Ross Lyon loves these days. Yeah,
he will. And the positive with Toby Travalia, like you said, they see him playing a variety of positions, particularly midfield down the line. So it was an interesting draft to watch play out for the Saints. And I think we talked about this, I don't know if it was on or off air with Dylan Alexander and Hayden Narducci, but it was a good draft because they answered their list needs with Travalia, Said, and Boxall. They all add something a little bit different to that midfield group. The more I thought about Pat Said, the more I'm glad he got onto an AFL list. I think he can be that Hugo Garcia type of player, hardworking, can play in the forward line, can play in the midfield. Slightly different, but very similar as well. And the only two things I'd question, Turu and Barrett, I think they see them both as defenders is the indication I've got. They're very similar types, and I know that people that know, not Benny Barrett, James Barrett, have compared him to Turu and sort of said, well, if Alex Taru's going so high, why is James Barrett not being in this boat as well? I don't think people expected them to end up at the same club. So it'd be interesting to see their careers pan out. And the negative for the Saints that really damages relationships with the Sandringham Zebras is that they didn't take anyone who played for the Sandringham Zebras despite agreement to do so for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and that's quite baffling. I think Cole on his own is just the one who'd be most devastated. Regardless.
Out of everyone in the draft, you'd say?
I mean, just given, even if he was linked or not linked, I think he did enough, proved himself enough. It was probably just whether it was dynamic enough and
kicking
in the kick as just as a general defender. Minus that one-on-one. Did he have enough? Bit stiff, and it'd be interesting. That relationship takes a sharp turn, you'd reckon. But what would the grade you give them?
I'd give them an A. I thought they were one of the real winners of the night, and good to get Alex Dodson as a I guess development type player as well. They've got Max Heath on the list, so I'm not sure where that leaves him. But it's always good to have a couple of backup rucks.
I feel like they've moved on past Max.
Feels
Heath.
That way, doesn't it? If he's going to play AFL, it's not going to be at St Kilda.
Well, even Isaac Keeler still yet to play. I know he's not a his ruck's not his main, but you'd still expect him to see him roll through there. So interesting. But Dodson, good steal at 53. I'd also give him an A. They actually bordering an A+. I think it's that good and suits the way they've been drafting and for their needs. The Swans, Jesse Detoli at 22. You had Bowman at 26, Riley Bice at 41. Riak Andrew, 55. Bid was not matched with Melbourne, which we expected.
Yep.
Blake Lidler and Ben Patton in the rookie draft. So
yeah.
Another one that was a bit interesting to assess, and the way I kept thinking about the way the Swans drafted, they're a team that's literally they're in the premiership window. They are the premiership window themselves. So they need players who can just make it happen now and win that grand final. I only really see that with a pick like Jesse Detoli, and after that, I just I don't know. I don't.
I'd have to put Riley Bice in that category as well. Just without knowing as much about him as I do about all of the other players. He's a VFL player, he's state league, so he's clearly ready to play senior footy. So I think he gives them that little bit of stability and depth that you want. But yeah, Jesse Detoli is someone that can impact this premiership window. It sounded like they were really keen to get a key forward. I know Archie Wicks was heavily linked. They ended up going in the direction of Ned Bowman. I guess I'd also think that Blake Lidler could possibly push as a bit of a smoky. I know I've been high on him all year, but just with that raw pace and bounce that he provides, players do tend to start their careers off half-back, and that's where he's played in the last few years. Yep. So I do think that he's someone that could potentially play AFL sooner than some people expect, and he suits their style as well.
And then I guess the Ben Patton decision just feels like depth more than anything. Riak Andrew, again...
Just a development player, really.
It just feels like they've drafted for depth in case of emergency rather than drafting for let's make it happen right now. So be interesting. They still haven't debuted Will Green from last year as well.
He's a ruck though, so
it takes time. But they've got a lot just kind of sitting there waiting for something to happen. Grade?
I think I'd give them a B+.
I'd give it a B-. It didn't really attract me quite a lot. The Bulldogs, Cooper Hines at 20, Lockie Jakes 29, Dolan 31, Sam Davidson 51, and Luke Kennedy 62.
Yeah.
It was. How would you sum it up? I'd say it's a neat draft selection.
I'd say they
did what they had to.
If not the biggest winners out of the draft, and they're certainly on the podium.
So you're that high. I mean, I was high on them. I had them in my top 5. I think because I'm looking at the value of talent, I think it's a lot more role player types than superstars. Like Cooper Hines, the only one I could say on that list becoming like a real look at me type player. Not as in arrogant, as just in like that real, that star power. But the others, I think, just come in and suit a role at some point, in their career. So I would rank it really highly, but I wouldn't have it top 3 because I just think others capitalise on value of talent a little more.
Well, I just guess when I look at it and I look at the draft selections that they had and I look at who they were able to bring in with those draft selections, I think it answers the list needs. They needed probably a bit of run-off half-back. They get Lockie Jakes, who offers exactly that, really competitive. They need some connecting sort of forwards in the front half that can put it on a platter for those marking forwards because they need players who are going to kick well inside 50 because once it gets to ground level inside 50, we know at the moment they're not as strong. Now, Josh Dolan and Luke Kennedy will hopefully add a bit of that dynamism at ground level, but more importantly, their ball use is really strong so that they can hopefully kick it to the advantage of your Jamara Ugle-Hagens and Aaron Nortons. Like you said, Cooper Hines, hard to argue with him, and Sam Davidson, someone who's ready-made. They were linked to Cooper Craig Peters as well, so clearly they don't mind looking at the VFL.
Yeah, well, it's just it's a very handy pickup, all very handy pickups for them. And are they one you'd consider in their window? I feel like they've been in a window for like 5 years now. Yeah, they're always there.
Yeah, they're always there or thereabouts. I think the positive with them is they've got those forwards, and for this window they'll be forwards. But then in that medium term, you could see Josh Dolan and more so Luke Kennedy being players that can help Riley Sanders in the midfield.
Grade?
A+.
A, just because of the talent itself, like on the earlier comment, but it's still one of my higher ones.
Before we wrap up, and I'll answer this question first because I've just sprung this on you, but most likely player to win the Rising Star next year from the 2024 draft crop, so it has to be someone drafted this year, but which player do you think is the most likely? If I was to give a name, I'd probably give that to Jagger Smith as being the most likely. I think he's a really bankable sort of player, and he's going to come in and be someone who can dominate straight away and show his wares at senior footy level. We saw it when he played VFL for Richmond.
It's hard because you've got to think of players who are going to play at least 15 games.
don't see Jagger doing that.
No, I do. I think he'll play round 1. I'm
Okay.
pretty confident. I don't know why you do all that work to get him to pick 3 just to see him in the VFL for a little bit, Just put him in. I'd have Harvey Langford. That's the name that comes to mind. I think he has that. He'll have enough games of like wow factor. And we saw it with Caleb Windsor for Melbourne this year where he just always has his name there or thereabouts. Who actually won it this year was Geelong player, wasn't it?
It was.
So it wasn't actually someone who was drafted in draft class.
Names escaped me. This is really bad. Ollie Dempsey.
That's right. So, well, actually, there'd be a few plays from last year.
Nate Caddy's a possibility, yeah.
Okay, but those are our 2. To finish with West Coast, Bo Allen, 16.
Oh, of course, West Coast completely.
Job Shanahan at 30, Tom Gross, 46, Luca Grego, 48, Hamish Davis all the way down at 65, and Malachi Champion as a Cat B.
Yep.
You rate it really highly, and so do I, but I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I just think they got all the bargain buys of this draft class. Bo Allen had been linked to Melbourne as a potential top 10 pick, slips to the teens. West Coast snaffle, a local boy. Job Shanahan had been linked as a potential fringe top 10 pick, best key position forward according to some players, slips to 30. He'll complement Oscar Allen really well. Tom Gross, a game changer, midfielder forward, slips into the 40s. West Coast Pounce, and Hamish Davis, another local boy that slips, and Luca Grego is a different type of midfielder, sort of half-back that will give them something a bit different. Yeah, a bit Brady Hoff-like for West Coast supporters out there for someone to compare to.
Do you think, and another question I'll put on you now, do you think they have drafted the most ready-made first-year players out of any club in the draft?
If you're to assess the draft as a whole, the entire,
every club and the players they've taken, I think West Coast have drafted, apart from maybe Tom Gross, and this is including Malachi Champion, I think they could all play AFL next year.
It's a good point. I don't think Malachi can, but I think everyone else can.
Look, Malachi, I think based off if it's last emergency scenarios, I think he could come in. I mean, he's kicked 3 goals in multiple times at senior level at Waffle. I know it's obviously a complete different jump, but can stack it at the senior level. Some of them haven't even played senior footy, so at least Melly has that behind him. But would you say that? Do you agree or disagree?
I'm looking at all the clubs in front of me now. It's very hard to disagree. Maybe the Dogs have got a few ready-made players as well, but I don't think they're all going to roll through there next year. So, yes, I would agree. And I'd also look at it and say, with West Coast's young talent, they're the most likely.
Well, that's the thing. They're the most likely to get in the side as well, so you have to take that into account. Yeah. Adelaide's the other team. I think Draper and Welsh could both play.
Yeah, but there's only 2 of them, and there's 5 or 6 of the Eagles.
I guess and that's what I really like about what they've done, given the fact that they're still quite behind in their development and still have. I mean, they show glimpses, but they are still quite behind compared to a lot of the competitions.
And I think that's something that's just happened by chance because they've just pounced on the best available. It's suited their needs, and it's going to probably propel them a little bit because, like you say, they're AFL ready. So it's all came together really well for them.
It certainly has. Grade
A+.
Yeah, A+ as well. So that wraps it up, I think, for our AFL draft content for this year. Actually, we will have some content still. Go check out our socials on Instagram and YouTube. Go back if you're a fan of any club. Jonty's done a lot of feature profiles on players, so you want to see a bit more of their character. Look through our channel. You did a lot with the Bendigo boys, GWV, so it's all there. We talked to Sandy and Oakley coaches on their prospects, so if you've got a player from Sandy or Oakley and want to hear a bit what their coach said about him, that's also on our channel. So make sure to check out that. Our AFLW draft content will be starting from December, so make sure to stay tuned for that and see our thoughts on the next draft of AFLW players. Thank you all for watching. Check out our socials for more, and we'll see you in another video.